Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for turning up. Just a quick introduction. I noticed on the announcement that it said Addibat Fيردي, Metaverse expert. I just want to clarify, I am not a Metaverse expert, and I don't think there's any such thing as a Metaverse expert. So I've been fortunate enough to have worked for companies like Meta and done a lot of work in this field, in immersive, for the last 20 years. So I think I have a bit of insight that I might be able to use for us to collectively figure out what that definition is. So what I want to talk about today is the creative, commercial and social potential of immersive ecosystems. And I want to answer 5 questions for us today. I noticed I was at a session yesterday around media and the metaverse, and I think we need to just dial that back a little bit and just start with a couple of very simple questions. What is the metaverse? What is it that's so good about it, which means that everyone is talking about it right now? Where do we feel that it's being used well, and what do we need to do to enter it now, and why is that a priority? Before maybe suggesting a couple of things as to how we could evolve towards it. So what is the metaverse? So according to the Harvard Business Review, the metaverse is the next iteration of how humans use the internet to connect, communicate and transact. I've noticed that a lot of people talk about the metaverse in terms of technology. And yes, technology is important, but technology is a facilitator. What we're doing now is enhancing the way that we can connect. So it's all about content, consumers and brand. So that's where I'm going to start with my conversation today. Now, in terms of value creation, there's a lot of statistics out there, 120 billion plus already being pumped into anything to do with metaverse. 79% of consumers active in the metaverse have actually made a purchase. And we're talking about sort of environments like, Roblox, Decentraland, Fortnite and so forth. And 15% of core revenue is expected to come from the metaverse within 5 years. And I guess that that's cool, and it's a projection, but I think we need to really dial back exactly what we mean by the metaverse in order that we can actually sort of predict some of these a bit more clearly. So this is an interesting example that 6.7 million people have already visited Nikeland. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to visit Nikeland yet, but that's huge. The fact that you've got something like Nikeland, where not only do you visit, there's an onboarding process in order to be able to virtually engage with that environment. So that's huge, and it means that this is something that's here to stay. It's not just hype. There's actually a big societal, global movement towards making this a reality. But here's the truth. No one knows what the metaverse is or what it will be capable of yet. Okay? And I just want to take us back and say, one thing I remember I heard somebody saying when I was here was, well, the metaverse is this great invention. How can we get into this new invention? It's not an invention, it's an evolution. It's something that has been in the ether, and technology and new modes of communication have allowed us to make it something that is persistent and pervasive right now. And the origin is the internet, right? It's the evolution of what has made the metaverse possible. Web 1.0, a read-only version of the internet. Web 2.0, users can read and create content, but there's a centralized monopoly on data, and that's key. The reason the metaverse is important, and this is what I would say is the core, is that users can not only read, create, and own things digitally, there is a decentralized ecosystem controlled by the community. So there's no longer a monopoly on data. And this notion of decentralization is going to be the key to how we build an economic proposition around the metaverse, and how we can then get to a place where the tech and all the investment can actually yield a return for businesses. So in my terms, I think the metaverse is this. It's an evolving network of immersive environments. And that word is key. Immersive is here. The metaverse, we don't know what that's going to be. To be honest, just as a sideline, the metaverse is an open source. It's intended as an open source, all-pervasive environment, right? That isn't what it is right now. Things like Facebook, Google are turning it into an oligopoly. So there isn't really an open source version. But what it is something that we want to be able to experience across all realities. So it's like a 3D website where you're digital twins. And this whole avatar movement, that's here to stay as well. It's all about how they will get to walk around in this spatially led, internet environment. So that's a simple version of what I think this is. And plenty of brands are already there. So I don't know how many of you have experienced Fortnite and Balenciaga. We've got the Louis Vuitton project, Blanco's Block Party. Lots of brands are already there and already experimenting. So to use football as an example, I think there's a couple of media, and the reason I'm here, media, sport, entertainment and automotive, with a bit of fashion. They seem to be leading the way in terms of what the metaverse can do and how immersive can really help us to enhance the way in which we can create value as we go forward. So the reason I've put this up here is Manchester City have built, a virtual version of their stadium. And a lot of other football teams are following up. But this is the key point from all of this, the key understanding, is that like when I was young, my route into football was my parents, my dad used to take me to a football match, and then I'd go, when I got my computer, I started playing FIFA. But the generations who are going to have the next disposable income, Gen Z, Alphas, that's not how they're starting. They're playing games first. And through the games, they then go towards that in real life experience. And that's fundamentally important in terms of where the value can be added with the metaverse. So the adoption curve as well is really steep. So if we look at, the way websites were adopted, apps were adopted, the sort of chat around metaverse and immersive is much steeper. So it's here already, and we need to respond to it. And this was an example that was used yesterday. So this notion of the metaverse, it already matters. So there was an Indian couple who got married in the pandemic to a Harry Potter themed wedding. They resurrected the father-in-law to actually give the bride away. Tickets were given out to people across the world. This sort of personalized, pervasive, wedding was held virtually. So if you can give something away as personal as a wedding, I think there is a real use case here for something that can add value in the long term. And I think, going back to Tim Berners-Lee, the guy, who was fundamentally important for the internet, he said this, that the goal of the web is to support and improve our web-like existence with each other. It's about connection. It's not about tech, it's about connection, right? And it is about being the ultimate empathy machine. How do we turn empathy into a business driver? That, for me, is where the metaverse is really going to matter. So I just wanted to show you this, that some of the work that we're doing around what technology can help us to do, what the metaverse means. There's a few fundamental things we need to bear in mind. We need to shift our mindset, so it's about, as I say there, it's like when devices and distractions are limiting our ability to truly be there, we need to sort of move towards using AR and VR to help, really live towards participating and engaging with something in real life in a way that is enhancing. And it's also about overcoming physical barriers, and it's about redefining our societal values. So it's not about making money, it's about adding value. It's not about sort of saying, well, we're going to do this thing at this particular time. It's an all-pervasive environment because fundamentally, we are moving, and this is a key point here, from a third-person passive engagement model. And what that means is anything that has the arbiter of a screen. So if you're experiencing something through a screen, it's at a distance, it's third person, it's passive. But what we need to move towards is first-person participatory engagement. If you wrap a virtual world around you, you are in it. You are a player. You are a character. So therefore, it's about first-person and participatory. So the evolution that we need is this. This is what we need to understand, and we need to shift the way we look at, the way we create brand opportunities in order to deliver this participatory engagement. So just one point on this is the ecosystem is evolving. The ecosystem started as something that was built for entertainment and media, but it's evolving to look at the creative potential of VR at the moment, but it'll be more than that. It's about more than just VR. It's about AR, XR, and it's looking at all realities. It's actually creating new ways of connecting and also about delivering impact. So now that we've talked about that, what's good about the metaverse? So it's about this. You can create incredible worlds beyond imagination, right? You don't have any kind of stranglehold on what you can do. And especially for media, that's fundamentally important, that you can basically build something that is global and bring that experience to you in a more immediate way. Right? You can defy the rules of physics and you can bypass things like distance, time, and gravity. And that might sound like, quite sort of coy and like a game, but it's not. It's really fundamentally important in how we do that one thing, which is break the barriers between content, consumer, and brand. That is the value of the metaverse. That's the value of immersive. Right? And it's about creating something that's augmented. So just to give you an example on this, if you know H&M, the brand, they said we've created the H&M metaverse. So what they did was, in my mind, take a very badly designed store in the real world and badly designed it in VR and called it a metaverse. That's not going to solve any problems. The whole point is it's not about replicating. It's about augmenting and enhancing and creating something that can add value to what you're doing in the real world. We still exist. This is still the most important reality. We need to enhance that. And that's what immersive strategy and immersive creativity is about. And it's also about blending the boundaries between the real and the virtual, because it's not, again, it's not about replicating, it's about creating that level of enhancement. It's about saying, what can we do here to get a bit more transparency, to get more informed on a granular level, and deliver something that's going to enhance us to be better versions of ourselves, right? And we've talked about visceral first-person participatory experiences. It's got to be about participation. It's got to be about us being at the center of those experiences. And it's about emotional connectedness through empathy. Empathy is the key, as I said before. It's about how we define that. A framework around empathy is what I think will fuel growth in any sector, whether it's manufacturing or any of the other sectors that we've mentioned. And specifically in media, I think we need to bear in mind that empathy, especially when talked about in terms of the metaverse, is the foundation of things like brand intimacy, affinity, and advocacy. Because we are not creating consumers anymore. We're creating fans. We're creating an advocacy model that gives us long-term enhancement. So, you know, that's another point that we need to bear in mind as we go forward. And I've said this already, so it's about enhancing our audience engagement by bringing content, consumer, and brand together. So when we think about this, this is the other thing, it's not just about marketing, right? It's about saying, so I'm working on a project with Siemens, the manufacturing company, around factory automation. So how can we actually solve problems in terms of cost effectiveness, understanding information, delivering innovation, and actually sort of, you know, co-collaborative design, using that as a key methodology for delivering frameworks, even in manufacturing. We've got to fundamentally rethink that customer journey, whatever level that customer journey comes into play. And you know, here's another thing, is that it's no longer a linear process. We're not creating, traditionally what we do is create linear ways in which we deliver experiences, right? They've got to happen in stages. That doesn't work anymore, because you have the opportunity to have awareness, consideration, trial, purchase, all happen in the same time, at the same point. And I'll show you some examples of that in a minute. So the idea being that we have to create an ecology, an ecosystem within which there are touch points, and we need to let go of control and embrace choice. So yeah, we can wrap any product service in the voice and values of a brand. So just to go on to the next one, sorry, I've sort of talked too much about this, is the promise of the metaverse is about these things in my mind. It's about igniting empathy. It's about pursuing your heart's desire. It's about redefining productivity and inspiring confidence. And these might sound sort of emotively led, but that's what this is about. It essentially is how we monetize emotional connection, right? So we've got to think in terms of, you know, these questions. What if we could finally walk in another person's shoes? And as an example, I did a whole experience about the Syrian refugee experience, just to give you that as an example. And it was, how do I break the barriers between me and my comfortable flat in London and somebody going through a whole experience where they're in a war-torn country and they've got to flee? And we did this experience, and it didn't really get much traction. But then we interviewed this guy who said that his mother gave him a pair of shoes so that she could, you know, he could be comfortable. He didn't put the shoes on because it meant so much to him. He said, when I get to the other end, I'll put them on. And what it got us thinking about is this: what's the core question we were actually trying to answer? How do we break that barrier? And the question was, what is the one thing that you would not leave behind if your whole world was falling apart around you? When we put that out and we gamified that question, that's when we broke the barriers. That's when we got the engagement. That's when we were actually solving a problem and getting real world social impact. And I think that's an important thing to bear in mind when we talk about what the metaverse is, and especially in media, how it can help us deliver the next evolution in connection. So as a summary, it's about these four things. It's about experiencing. So it's not, you know, design a shop. It's about, you know, a zero gravity spaceship, and I'll talk about an example in a minute. It's about how we feel and connect and evolve. So I did a project with Charlotte Tilbury, the fashion brand. All of their projects are geared towards, how can I make myself look better? All we did through a huge process of consultancy was to say, if you think about how your products make you feel better, you fundamentally change your relationship with your audience, their relationship with your products, and the way you can enhance the value in the long term. And I think that's where the key is to what immersive can help us do in this sector specifically. So where's it being used well? So I've summarized it. I think these are my sort of top line on this. It's like, it's about gamification, right? There's a difference between games and gamification. We need to gamify and enhance our relationship to our consumers and the experiences that they have. It's about immersion. We've talked about immersion. Immersion doesn't mean a VR headset. Immersion means that you really engage and enhance that notion of presence, being there in the moment and actually being able to deliver something that's meaningful. It's about personalization, and decentralization as well is something that I think with all the conversation around NFTs, blockchain, crypto, great. But if we don't understand the fundamental framework for why we are doing this, all we're going to do is do what we've already done and just add on solutions that work in the short term but have no long-term value, right? So these are my sort of conclusions. Just as examples of that, Louis Vuitton, this game. Very simple. Nothing about the brand. All it is an enhanced experience of you being able to just look at the core brand values and how those core brand values tie into your core values. That's the trick. And this is a project, I'm just going to see if this works. This is a project that I did at Meta, which was, is there a way that I could pick up an e-bike and feel the difference between an aluminium bike and a graphite bike by literally using the controllers. So this notion of using sort of sensorial marketing, feeling the weight of an object. We did this thing with a fragrance brand where we picked up the bottle, you feel the weight of it, you spray it, and using embedded memory, you can actually get a sense of what it smells like. So if there was a pomegranate scent, so by sort of looking at embedded memory, you get a chance to actually sort of say, well, just in VR, we can deliver these kind of experiences. So I'll put that into context in a bit. But here's an example of an early iteration of Facebook venues where it was all about, could we have this session that we're having right now with all of you being in different parts of the world, but me still being able to talk to you as if you were in the same space? Could I be here in this reality, turn around and talk to somebody who is on the other side of the world, but have a meaningful conversation in real time? And that technology exists. And don't get me wrong, there is a barrier at the moment. The technology is very early stage. It's like a PlayStation 1 or an iPhone 3 or something, we're not there yet. No one wants to wear a brick on their head, I get that. But we're getting there slowly. And I just wanted to touch on this about virtual influencers. There are influencers who have millions and millions of followers who are totally digital on platforms like Instagram. And this direct to avatar marketing model is something that's going to become more and more pervasive, more and more important, especially within the media sector. And we'll talk a bit more about virtual influencers. But I wanted to touch on this notion of NFTs and this notion of decentralization. I don't know, I was having a conversation with somebody just beforehand about the fact that NFTs, it's like, the market's fallen out of them. Why? Crypto's nothing, it means nothing. And I fundamentally disagree. What's happened is we've experimented, right? And people are using NFTs according to the methods that they already know, which is, oh, it's a collectible. I'll collect this thing and it will be mine. So I understand what a sort of decentralized ledger is, so I'll use that and I'll own it. But it has no utility. Right? Our next evolution in NFTs is using it as part of how we deliver virtual real estate, how we build our own metascapes, as I call them, how we then create something of social value. And when we start doing that, NFTs are going to pick up again for the long term. We're still experimenting. So I believe that crypto and fundamentally what the blockchain offers us is going to be key to the way in which we build what we're calling the metaverse. Why is it important now? Behaviors are changing, right? So all of us in this room, by the way, how many of you have ever put an Oculus or any kind of VR headset on your heads? So that's about half the room. I just to ask you guys, it fundamentally changes, I think, and I don't know if you agree, the way you actually perceive the environment that you've just put on your head. So if you haven't done it, go and check out experiences like Richie's Plank or Traveling While Black and these kind of experiences. Just watch them and see what it does in terms of how you connect to the content, because I think there are very, very important ramifications for the media sector as a whole. And I think this is the key point here. At the moment, we are creating experiences that inspire people to buy something. what I think is even more important is that we need to build experiences that are aspirational, i.e. about how do we become a better version of ourselves. And using that aspirational model to create advocacy is what will give us value in the long term. Making money is a byproduct. We'll still make it, but there'll be meaning. It's about value. And that's what new generations want. They want that value proposition, right? And it's interesting with this because it's very much about how we enhance the way in which we create, a communication, a connection. And I think that's the key here. And Gen Z and Alphas, as I've already said, they're already there. They're already doing this because they crave that kind of connection, because there's a new model. They're hacking the system. So if we don't facilitate these experiences, we're going to miss out. And that's why it's important now. So it's about moving from an inspire to an aspire model. And I think that is the ultimate sort of, line on this. So how can we move towards the metaverse? I think the job at hand, especially within our sector, and by the way, just to say, one of the key things that I'm trying to do is develop a global epicenter for immersive and the metaverse. And in this region specifically, and especially in Dubai, I think the opportunities in terms of innovation, the creative capital that we have, and the sort of room to actually sort of explore, there is no reason why we can't deliver something that's world leading within this region. That's part of the job. Because I think what we need to do is to be able to evolve the way we think about our organizational DNA and be ready for an immersive future. And we need to humanize the brand using something that I call empathy tech. So just a couple of examples. We did this project with a sports car brand, and the idea was, could I buy a sports car, high performance sports car for $500,000 or whatever, without taking my headset off? And the answer is yes, right? So we went through this whole process about, this notion of onboarding. Could I feel, the door clicking? Can I hear it using spatial audio? Could I put my hands around the steering wheel and really know what it's like? Can I feel the sound of the engine? And when you start to think like that and you use, sort of influencers, you find a way to really personalize that experience, there was conversion. I'm just running out of time, so I'm going to show you this example, which is with Nike. Instead of designing a trainer, how do you create a personalized asset? So this was all about saying, well, could we work with an influencer and actually sort of say, well, if we're designing a trainer, rather than just being something you put on your feet, what does it mean to you? How would you design the trainer? How can you express yourself to actually get this thing out there? So what you get at the end is a personalized token, a personalized item, which we created this thing called the Infinite Gallery. So you actually display this thing you've designed with your friends and you share in that. And it's all about that. It's all about that decentralized, personalized communication. I just want to show you this project. I'll be 2 minutes, I'll leave. I see people looking at me. So it's like, this is a project called Killing Honor, and it's essentially saying, could I eradicate forced marriages and honor crimes in the real world by telling powerful stories? So essentially what we did here was, again, it's all about empathy. We created not only a feature film, but is there a way that I could create an experience where you could go and have that lived reality to really understand what the issue is? And I guess the point of showing you this example here, and I'll show you this here, is it's not about delivering a linear story. It's about creating, as I said, an ecology where there's common understanding. It's not about binary judgment. It's about shades of grey. How do we understand a story from different points of view? If we apply that to media, it's about saying, what are the different vantage points? How can I give the choice to our audience in terms of how they want to engage with this content? So here what we had was, we had a project. I basically hired out an old warehouse, whitewashed the walls, and we played loads of sound, people commenting about forced marriages and honor crimes. We did a lot of data studies. We brought all this information in. And when we correlated it, what we found that there was 3 key issues that people were interested in: political awareness, feminism, prejudice. So we built the whole story, the whole ecosystem around those core thematic drivers. So it's all about empathy. I'm not going to show you those. I just want to show you one last example. This is Amazonia, and this is a project that I think is the closest anyone has come to saying, is there something we can do in the metaverse to create real-world social impact? So this whole project is about delivering. They've bought some land. in the Amazon, and they've basically created a metaverse. And anything you do in the metaverse has real-world social implications. So we're trying to solve problems like climate change, biodiversity, and we have a whole economic system, an NFT landscape that says, how do we deliver ownership, value, social impact by creating this environment that's pervasive across all realities? And what you're seeing here is, a relationship between Amazonia and what's happening in the real world. So just to conclude, the metaverse allows us to form an ecology where customers discover together. And I think this is especially important for media. They collaborate and aspire to be better versions of themselves, and transactions need to be seen as a byproduct of people's affinity and advocacy towards the brand. And I'm not going to show you these. I'm just going to move to the last slide and say thank you for listening. So if there's any questions, come and find me afterwards.